What do you surmise happened here? The behavior of science suddenly became bizarre and tainted in some way that was hard to understand. What do you think happened to us?
You remember what was going on with President Trump and so on and so forth. It was a huge thing. And so once someone's out there and they've sort of set their position for themselves, it's very hard for someone to retract from that position just from a sort of personal, reputation, if that's the right word, or a personal appearance kind of fashion. And so I think a lot of people dug themselves into holes that they couldn't get out of. And that's just one. I mean, we can come up with other answers. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
It's baffling to me.
It's still kind of baffling. There's so many questions that I would love to know, for instance, the relative risk of vaccine versus COVID in a 25-year-old. Just take a single age cohort. 25-year-olds, I still can't figure out what the risk reward is yet. And that seems like a critically important question. I wonder if somebody's asking it and looking into it. I
I've
don't
done.
know.
I've actually asked that question. FDA did actually do a calculation along the lines that you're describing. And I think that was, to my knowledge, that was the first time I saw one. But I went in, and I've done it now several times for different age groups. I haven't done it for 25-year-olds, but I've done it for 5 to 11 and 12 to 15 in different ways. And I've included other kinds of adverse events like neurological events and severe adverse events. So what it turns out to be, in the FDA's initial analysis, they had approximately I think it was a 5-to-1 benefit over risk, approximately, if my numbers are correct. When I calculated, I reversed that to about 20-to-1 or even greater in the opposite direction. So there are calculations that are available. The problem with that, Drew, is that and this is again speaks to the transparency issue. FDA now went ahead. They published this risk benefit calculation with a formula, with a model, in a peer-reviewed journal. And as you well know, oftentimes it says, for more information, for a copy of this, this, and this, please write to the author. So I wrote to the author, who had stated in the paper that they could give us a copy of this model, the Excel spreadsheet. Rather than receive that, I was then transferred to a FOI, Freedom of Information person within the FDA. Says, no, you have to file an FOI request to do that. I mean, I think that's completely ridiculous.
Where did the erosion of the standards of the FDA and the CDC start?
The regulators themselves ultimately end up relying on the summary results of the drug companies in their sponsored trials, where the raw data is kept commercially confidential. Huge financial conflict of interest, receiving 86% of its funding from the pharmaceutical industry they are supposed to regulate. In effect, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've got the poacher paying the gamekeeper. Doctors and patients must appreciate how deeply and extensively drug regulators can't be trusted so long as they're captured by the industry funding.
I think the first thing that people need to understand is the word safe and effective. And I'm sure everyone's heard it splashed around everywhere. So we need to understand what that means, and then what it doesn't mean, and what it is thought to mean at current, and then we'll be able to answer your question. So in a normal situation, a medical product of a new drug, let's say, is going to come on the market, the FDA have to assure themselves, based on the information that the drug manufacturer provides and the studies that the FDA have asked them to do, that the drug is both safe and effective, as you've mentioned in the historical introduction there. Because of under certain conditions, the FDA can lower those standards. Okay, and this is people don't realize that that's the case. But the standard that is employed for the emergency use authorization, which is as the name exactly implies, is not that the drug or the new product has to be safe and effective. It has to be. The word is may be effective. That's a technical term that's used in the various documentation. So the company is not required to go the whole hog, and the FDA is not required to insist on a much larger range of studies that would show effectiveness, but merely they have to believe, based on a number of things, that the drug may be effective. So whenever you hear the word safe and effective, that's absolutely not correct. At best, all FDA have done is determine to their standard that the drug may be effective. Okay. Now, in terms of safety, that definition is a little harder to sort of get your head around. But rather than use the word safe, the documents say that FDA have to something like assure themselves or satisfy themselves that they believe that the potential and known benefits outweigh the potential and known risks. So that's a slightly different version of saying safe. It's not the same thing. So that's okay in a pandemic situation. But obviously that has to be backed up with real data, and any drug, even in a normal situation, there's always new data coming out, and FDA is always obliged, the company is always obliged to update their safety profile based on the best known information currently. So I think one of the main problems is that there was a rush to get this out of there. FDA took a lot of shortcuts. We'll show a couple of slides in a moment where they took some shortcuts, and they didn't backfill those things. And to Drew's question earlier, why did this happen? I think people made potentially honest mistakes in some cases I think more reckless than that. But it's very hard for people to dig themselves out of those sorts of holes. So I think that we had a perfect storm of things that happened. Plus, we can't ignore the politics. The two of the FDA senior people resigned about a year ago, Doctors Gruber and Krauss. They felt there was too much interference from the White House, I believe.
Today, I'm announcing a petition with the Supreme Court of Florida to impanel a statewide grand jury to investigate any and all wrongdoing in Florida with respect to COVID-19 vaccines. And Joe Latipo want to build off the work he's done by increasing surveillance and research of adverse impacts from the COVID-19 shots.
She shared with me a study that was published in Clinical Research in Cardiology. Our media has clearly demonstrated that it is impossible to report accurately on something if you're also taking money from that same something.
I don't always share the news, but when I do, I lie.
Thank you for watching.
Though you can expect a clear answer to this question in exactly never.
Like, what is this? Like, what are they doing here?
You sound like a conspiracy
I do.
theorist.
I am a conspiracy theorist. Look, some of them are real. I'm not a outrageous or illogical conspiracy theorist for the most part.
I believe you.
But there's a lot of conspiring. The idea that conspiracies don't exist. Well, what about Enron? What about the Iraq War? There's so many conspiracies that you can prove easily.
Yeah.
They've turned out to be true, and just follow the money and power.